At my sister's graduation dinner, I walked in ready to celebrate only to realize there wasn't even a seat for me. My parents looked me up and down and said, "Well, you didn't go to college, you don't belong at the main table." Then my mom turned back to the waiter and ordered the most expensive wine, as if I were invisible. I stayed quiet until the bill came. $2,500. When the waiter asked who was covering it, I stood, grabbed my jacket, and said, "Not the one who doesn't belong." Have you ever felt pushed aside by your own family, treated like you didn't deserve a seat at their table? Share your thoughts and tell me, where are you watching from today? Hi. My name is Emily Carter. I am 28 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. If you ask anyone in my family, they will say I am the different child, not in a way that makes them proud, but in the sense that I never lived up to the standards my parents set. I did not go to college. I do not have a framed diploma on the wall or graduation photos in a cap and gown to post on Facebook. After finishing high school, I chose a different path. I enrolled in trade school and spent countless hours in garages that smelled of oil and grease, learning how to service and repair cars. At first, many people laughed, saying a girl working with machines had no future, but I stuck with my choice. Now, I run a mobile car care service I built from scratch. I have a small van filled with tools, driving all over the city to wash, polish, and change oil for clients. The work is steady, the income is enough for me to pay rent on my little apartment, save a little each month, and most importantly, I do not have to depend on anyone to survive. But none of that ever mattered in the eyes of my parents. Robert and Linda Carter have always put their faith in what they call the prestigious path, degrees, office careers, things that sound glamorous and give them pride when talking to friends. And Sophia, my younger sister, is the perfect embodiment of that dream. She is 5 years younger than me and just graduated with honors in economics from the University of California, Berkeley, a school my parents have always spoken of as a paradise. Ever since Sophia entered college, every meal, every family conversation revolved around her. How professors praised her, how her research project earned an A, and the endless promises of a brilliant future in Boston or New York. As for me, whenever I was introduced, I would usually only hear, "This is Emily, our eldest daughter, she does car service." Period, never with any sense of pride attached. Even so, I never hated Sophia. On the contrary, I understood that she was smart, hardworking, and often under heavy pressure from our parents' expectations. She was not the one who turned me into a shadow, it was our parents who built that comparison. That is why, when Sophia called me with a voice that trembled slightly but carried genuine warmth, saying, "Please come to my graduation dinner. It won't feel complete without you," I hesitated for a moment before agreeing. It was rare for her to reach out so directly. I knew that stepping into that dinner meant preparing myself to be belittled, excluded, and overlooked, but I also knew that if I refused, Sophia would be hurt. And I still wanted her to know that, even if I was considered not good enough, I would still show up and support her. That evening, after closing my schedule, locking up my van, and hanging my oil-stained coveralls on the rack, my heart felt heavy. I slipped into a simple dress, put on a pair of heels I had not worn in years, and stood in front of the mirror for a long while. Whatever happened, I would go. It was a promise I had made to Sophia, and it was also a challenge to myself, to see whether, after all these years, my family could finally look at me as a real part of them. When I stepped out of my apartment, the Denver night air was crisp and cool. I drove 45 minutes to Cherry Creek, where the upscale restaurant my mother had chosen stood proudly on a central street lined with glowing yellow lights. It was a classic-style steakhouse, so well known that the moment you pushed through its thick glass doors, the scent of grilled meat mingled with the rich aroma of wine. A waiter in a crisp white shirt and black apron walked over to open the door, his voice gentle. "Welcome, the Carter party has a reservation in the main room." I nodded slightly, forcing a smile, though inside it felt like a stone was sinking in my stomach. I had braced myself for this, but some small part of me still hoped things would be different. That maybe, just this once, they would remember that I was family too. Inside, the soft golden light fell across tables draped in crisp white cloths, silverware polished to a gleam and lined up perfectly, and thin crystal glasses sparkling under the glow. A small group of violinists played gentle classical music in the corner of the room. I looked around and quickly spotted my family seated at the longest table, right in the center of the hall. My father sat at the head, raising his glass in conversation with my uncle. My mother sat beside him, her hair neatly styled, dressed in a velvet red gown that made her look like she belonged at an elite gala. On both sides were my grandparents, a few relatives, and, of course, Sophia, seated in the middle like a princess at her coronation. The whole table was filled with laughter, proud glances, and the soft chime of glasses clinking together. I walked forward, my heart racing. But when I stopped, I froze. At that long table, there was not a single empty chair. I stood still for a few seconds, thinking perhaps one had been pushed in under the table or maybe someone had not arrived yet. But no, every seat was taken, no place left for me. My mother looked up, her eyes flashing momentary surprise as though she had spotted an uninvited guest. Her gaze swept from my slightly worn heels up to my simple dress and finally rested on my face. She gave a thin, cool smile. "Oh, Emily, you came too." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, Sophia invited me." My mother gave a slight shrug, swirling the wine in her glass. "Well, I didn't really expect you to show up. This table is reserved for family. I mean, for the graduation celebration. You know, since you didn't go to college, it doesn't quite make sense for you to sit at the main table." Then she tilted her head toward the nearby waiter. "Could you arrange a spot for her at the bar?" Her tone was soft, almost polite, but each word cut like a blade. I could hear a few uneasy whispers from some relatives, but no one spoke up. Sophia turned to glance at me, her eyes wavering, lips parting as if to say something, but in the end she remained silent, leaving me standing there. For a few seconds, I wished the floor would crack open so I could disappear. But instead, I swallowed hard and nodded to the waiter. He looked a little awkward but then led me to a small two-person table tucked into the corner of the room, right next to the wine rack. From there, I could see the entire long table, hear every laugh, every toast, but the distance felt like an invisible wall. I sat down, holding the heavy leather menu without being able to read a single word. The waiter asked gently if I wanted to order anything. I forced a smile. "I'll wait until they're done and order with them." The truth was, I wasn't hungry, my throat felt tight. For the next 2 hours, I sat alone, listening to the sounds of the dinner like a stranger in someone else's celebration. I watched Sophia being toasted, hugged, kissed, and photographed dozens of times. I saw my mother call over the waiter, her voice brimming with pride. "Bring out the 2015 Cabernet Reserve," she said slowly, enunciating each word as if to show off her sophistication. Everyone raised their glasses, the light catching their faces in a warm glow. And me? I had only a glass of water in front of me. Now and then a pair of eyes would flicker toward me but quickly turn away, as if my presence might spoil the party. I tried to appear indifferent, scrolling through a few news headlines on my phone just to avoid watching the scene. But my heart felt heavier and heavier. After so many years of being placed on the outside, I had grown used to it, yet seeing myself excluded right in the middle of a family celebration still stung like a fresh wound. As dessert was being served, I began to think about slipping out quietly. But then the deciding moment arrived. The waiter brought over a black leather tray and placed it on the main table. Inside was the bill, $2,500 in total. He bowed politely and asked, "Would you like this combined or separated?" The entire table fell silent. My father glanced at my mother. And then, as if rehearsed, she turned her head toward me. Her voice was syrupy sweet but crystal clear. "Emily, did you bring your card? You should contribute for your sister just this once. She just graduated, this is a big occasion." I went numb. I had no seat, no toast, no mention as part of the family. And now they expected me to pay for a dinner I hadn't even touched. I felt the blood rush to my face, my hands trembling with anger. The waiter looked at me, his eyes uneasy, as though he too recognized the unfairness of it. I stood up slowly, pushed my chair neatly back in. I slipped my coat over my shoulders, drew a long breath to steady my voice. Looking straight at my mother, I spoke not loudly, but firmly enough for the entire table to hear. Not the one who doesn't belong. Then I turned and walked toward the door. The heavy glass door closed behind me, the violin music fading in the distance. I didn't look back, didn't search for anyone's eyes. In that moment, I knew something inside me had changed forever. As dessert was being served, I began to think about slipping away quietly. But then the decisive moment came. The waiter brought a black leather tray and set it down on the main table. Inside was the total bill. $2,500. He bent politely and asked, "Would you like this combined or separated?" The entire table went silent. My father glanced at my mother. And then, as if it had been planned, she turned her head toward me. Her voice was syrupy, sweet but clear and deliberate. "Emily, did you bring your card? You should contribute for your sister just this once. She just graduated, this is a big occasion." I went completely still. I had no seat, no toast, no mention as part of the family. And now they expected me to pay for a dinner I hadn't even touched. I felt blood rushing to my face, my hands trembling with anger. The waiter looked at me, his eyes uneasy, as if he too recognized the injustice. I stood up very slowly, sliding my chair neatly back in place. I slipped my coat over my shoulders, took a deep breath to steady my voice. Looking straight at my mother, I spoke not loudly, but firmly enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Not the one who doesn't belong." Then I turned and walked toward the door. The heavy glass door closed behind me, the violin music fading into the distance. I didn't look back, didn't search for anyone's eyes. In that moment, I knew something inside me had changed forever. I drove out of the parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The Denver streetlights stretched out ahead, blotches of yellow spilling across the windshield. My mother's words still echoed in my ears. "You didn't go to college, you don't belong at the main table." It repeated itself like a cruel refrain, blending with the sound of the tires rolling over the damp pavement after a light rain. I didn't cry. I thought I would break down like I had so many times before, but this time was different. The pain didn't rise up violently, it settled, cold and heavy, like a sheet of ice forming inside my chest. I no longer wished for their recognition. I no longer held out hope that one day my parents would suddenly change and see my worth. All that remained was a numbness and a quiet anger, steady but sharp, like a knife hidden inside my coat pocket. The car turned onto the long road leading back to my small apartment, and, as if on cue, old memories crowded in, so vivid it felt like I was reliving them moment by moment. I remembered the day I graduated from high school, when my whole class buzzed with excitement for the ceremony and everyone's families came to cheer them on. I had looked forward to that day, not because of the diploma everyone got won, but because I hoped to see my parents proud of me. But that morning, my mother had only said quickly, "Good luck, Emily. Tonight I have to take Sophia to her piano competition." And she did. Throughout the entire ceremony, as I held my diploma in my hands, the two seats in the parents' section where I had imagined them sitting stayed empty. I smiled it off, pretending not to notice, but inside there was only a raw, aching void. Then came one Christmas. Sophia was 15 and I had just turned 20. The tree in the living room glowed with lights, piles of presents stacked beneath it. Sophia unwrapped her gift from our parents, the latest iPhone, sleek and shiny, the charger still carrying the scent of new plastic. Her joyful squeals filled the whole room. When I tore open my wrapping paper, all I found inside was a set of discounted books from a shop downtown, the covers already scuffed. My father chuckled, "You're the older daughter, you don't need much. These books are enough." I forced a smile, but my heart clenched. I never asked for extravagance, only the feeling of being treated fairly. Yet in their eyes, Sophia always deserved the very best, while I was expected to be content with leftovers. When I decided to start my mobile car care business, I thought maybe this would be the moment they finally saw me differently. I had worked tirelessly, saving every penny from side jobs, buying an old van and transforming it into a rolling workshop with my own hands. I proudly told my parents that I had my first client, that I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. But my mother only raised an eyebrow and sighed. A girl covered in grease? That's nothing respectable, Emily. That's not a career, just a filthy little hobby. My father patted my shoulder, but his distant look told me everything. To him, I was still just a child playing at something reckless, not an adult choosing her own path. Those images stacked on top of each other like pages of an old file being slammed onto a desk, each one echoing in my mind. Tonight, sitting at that side table near the bar, listening to the clinking glasses at the main table, I finally understood I would never have a place in their story. And when my mother turned to ask me to pay the $2,500 bill for a dinner I hadn't even been allowed to sit at, it felt like the final, decisive cut. I no longer felt abandoned. What I felt was clarity, cold and absolute. The love and recognition I had searched for all these years would never come from them. The red light stopped me at the intersection. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw my face in the dark. There were no tears, only cold eyes and clenched teeth. I realized that in the very moment I was pushed aside, I had found a new strength. That anger didn't explode into shouting or useless tears. It flowed quietly inside me, sharpening every sense, reminding me it was time to stop waiting. If I didn't belong at their table, I would build one of my own. If I wasn't given a seat, I would craft one for myself. And for the first time in years, I felt my heart stop trembling. Maybe, in that coldness, I was discovering something I had never had before. The resolve to let go of false hope and finally live for myself. 3 days after that evening at the restaurant, when the invisible cuts still throbbed inside me, my phone buzzed. My father's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, a part of me still hoping he would mention the dinner, offer some explanation, or at least ask how I was. But when I opened the message, the words were brief and cold. "Are you free? The garage at home broke down. Come help your dad." Not a single word about the dinner, not a question about why I had walked out, not even the slightest sign that he realized how deeply I had been hurt. Just a request, as if I were a repair worker to be called whenever the house had a problem. I stared at the screen for several minutes, my fingers trembling. Then I put the phone down without replying. For the first time, I let my father's message sit there, unread. A few days later, the family held a backyard barbecue at my uncle's house. I wrestled with the decision for a long time, but in the end I chose to go. Partly because I didn't want to lose touch with my grandparents, the rare ones in the family who still treated me kindly, and partly because I wanted to see for myself how everyone would act after that night at the restaurant. As soon as I stepped into the backyard, laughter filled the air, mingling with the smoky scent of grilled meat in the early summer breeze. My mother stood near the food table, a glass of white wine in her hand. The moment she saw me, she gave a thin smile and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, Emily came too. Let's hope this time you don't walk out halfway through, like you did at the restaurant." I heard a few awkward chuckles ripple through the group, while inside my chest it felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I forced a stiff smile and simply said, "Hello, everyone." Ho. The atmosphere quickly returned to its lively buzz, but I stood there, feeling out of place. Across the yard, Sophia was sharing details about her upcoming job in Boston. She was about to join a large investment firm, something my parents proudly called a real step into the world. The whole family gathered around her, showering her with questions. What's the salary like? Where's the office located? What are the chances for promotion? Their eyes sparkled, their voices brimming with excitement. I stood a few steps away, holding a cup of soda, as if I were just some guest passing by. Not a single person asked how my work was going, even though I had just signed a maintenance contract for an entire fleet of delivery vans in the city, a deal that had taken me months of effort to secure. As the meal was winding down, my mother came over and pulled me aside, as if she were about to share something important. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice softening. though her eyes kept that same familiar coldness. "Emily, I need a favor," she said. "The Alumni Association is hosting a fundraising gala soon, and I'm on the organizing committee. We want to rent a few luxury cars to shuttle guests, but the paperwork is a bit complicated. Since you already have a company and the proper documentation, I thought it would be easier if you signed the contract under your name. When it's all done, just send me the invoice and we'll settle up later." She said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if I would happily agree, like an employee following a boss's orders. I stood frozen. In that instant, every memory rushed back. The missing chair at the dinner, the contempt in her eyes when she called me the one without a degree, the cheap Christmas gift under the tree, the biting remarks when I opened my mobile car service. All of it connected, as clear as a completed puzzle. In their eyes, I had never been a daughter, a sister, or family. I was just a tool, a breathing ATM, a convenient name to sign on contracts, a card to swipe when they needed something. I took a deep breath and looked straight into my mother's eyes. "I can't do that. This is my company, and I don't want my name tied to things I can't control." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. "Emily, don't be so difficult. This is for the family, for Sophia's reputation too. What do you lose by helping?" I shook my head, this time my voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not doing it. I've lost too much already trying to please this family. Time and again, the only time you remember me is when you need someone to pay for things I wasn't even invited to. I've had enough." The air around us suddenly grew heavy. My mother narrowed her eyes, ready to say something more, but then she simply drew a sharp breath and turned on her heel, walking away. I stood there, feeling my heart still pounding hard, but instead of trembling or feeling ashamed as I had so many times before, this time I felt something else. A quiet strength, a firmness I had never known. Maybe, for the first time in my life, I had truly set a boundary for myself. I left the barbecue early that day. On the drive home, the echoes of laughter from the backyard still played in my mind, but I no longer felt dragged down by it. I understood that I had chosen and that I would keep choosing. No longer the obedient daughter sitting at the side table, no longer the backup wallet. From here on, I would live differently. And they, perhaps, would never understand that the day I said no was the day I began to find myself. A week after the family BBQ, while I was sitting in my small apartment finishing an invoice for a regular client, a new email notification suddenly popped up. It was from a luxury transportation company in Denver. The subject line read, "Limousine rental contract confirmation. Total value $7,500. Client, Blake Mobile Auto Care." My heart skipped a beat. I opened the email and found an electronic contract already signed, attached to a detailed invoice. 3 high-end limousines booked to serve a scholarship fundraising gala at the end of the month. The contract was officially under my company's name. I read each line again and again, my palms turning cold and sweaty. I had never contacted this company, had never booked a single vehicle. And yet the electronic signature on the contract bore my name, along with my business tax information, my EIN, which I had registered and guarded carefully for my company. My head spun. It felt as if someone had just broken into my home, stolen my identity, and I hadn't even had the chance to fight back. I immediately opened the technical details section of the electronic contract. There it was, the IP address used to sign the confirmation, a string of numbers that was all too familiar. It was the IP from my parents' Wi-Fi, the one I had set up for them years ago. My heart sank. There was no doubt now the contract had been signed from the very house I grew up in. And the only people who could have accessed my EIN information were my family, because they knew I had once stored a scanned copy of the documents on the old iPad I had lent them. I tried to stay calm, took a deep breath, and dialed my mother's number. The phone rang a few times before she picked up, her voice casual as if nothing had happened. "Hello, Emily, what's going on?" I didn't waste time circling around. "Mom, I just received an email about a limousine rental contract. It's under my company's name, I never signed anything. Did you use my information?" There was a brief silence on the other end, then she gave a dry little laugh. Oh, come on, you're overreacting. Yes, I asked someone to sign it. You have a company, you have the paperwork, it's not a big deal to let the family use it. This is a big gala, it's important for Sophia. What harm is there if you just help out? I went numb, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Mom, this isn't a small thing. This is my company. If anything goes wrong, the legal responsibility falls on me. Why would you do this without even asking me first? Her tone shifted, turning cold and edged with reproach. You always blow everything out of proportion. Families are supposed to help each other. Sophia just graduated, we need everything to be perfect. Signing under your name is just a technicality, no one will blame you. Don't be so selfish. I froze. This wasn't just disregard anymore, this was blatant exploitation, turning me into a legal shield so they could show off at some social event. My mind raced with scenarios. If the transportation company broke the contract, if there was an accident, if a lawsuit arose, everything would trace back to my company. Not Sophia, not my parents, me. They had placed me in real danger and still treated it like nothing at all. I bit my lip, forcing my voice to stay steady. Mom, I'll say this one more time. This is my company. I will not let anyone use it without my consent. If you ever do this again, I'll have to handle it differently. On the other end, she exhaled sharply, her voice dripping with disdain. Emily, you always disappoint me. Sisters are supposed to support each other. You only ever think of yourself. Then she hung up. I sat in silence, my apartment sinking into stillness. The computer screen still glowed with that contract, the figure $7,500 glaring back at me like a scar across my forehead. A chill ran down my spine. For years, I had grown used to being overlooked, excluded from family dinners, mocked for not having a prestigious career. But this time, they had gone further. They hadn't just denied me, they had exploited me, legally, using my name, my company, and treating it as if it were nothing more than their right. I turned my computer back on, opening every folder and combing through all my documents. For the first time, I realized that in their eyes, I wasn't just the not good enough daughter, I was a convenient tool, a shield they could use whenever it suited them. I no longer felt like part of that family at all. I was just a name on paper, a signature waiting to be slapped onto any contract they needed. And when that truth revealed itself, I understood that the line between being disregarded and being exploited had already been erased. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my chest. My mother's words kept echoing in my head. It's family, what harm is there in helping Sophia? On the surface, it sounded gentle, but to me, it was a sentence. I knew I couldn't let this go. Not just because of my company, but because of me. The next morning, I woke with heavy eyes after a sleepless night. Dim light filtered through the curtains, falling across my cluttered desk. The $7,500 limousine rental contract still glowed on my laptop screen, each line of text taunting me, reminding me that even my name and hard work could be so easily stolen for someone else's gain. I knew I couldn't let this fade away like all the other times. This wasn't about being overlooked or pushed to the side at a family dinner. This was legal. This was someone blatantly using my business identity for their own benefit. And if I didn't protect myself, who would? As I sat there, running my hands through my hair in frustration, a name came to me. Maya Patel. A few years ago, I had provided car detailing service for the law office where she worked. Back then, I had been struck by her calm, sharp demeanor and the way she spoke to me like a partner, not just a mechanic. We had kept in light contact, she would occasionally check in about my work, and I would send her holiday cards. And now, I knew I needed Maya's professionalism on my side. I called, my voice trembling. Maya, this is Emily. I have an urgent matter. I don't know if you can spare some time for me. I think I'm in legal trouble. On the other end, Maya answered immediately, without hesitation. Come to my office this afternoon, bring everything related to the situation, and Emily, don't panic, we'll figure this out. That afternoon, I sat in a small conference room at Patel and Associates. The walls were lined with framed certificates and degrees, but it wasn't those that made me feel safe, it was Maya's calm, steady tone. I handed her the printed limousine contract, the confirmation email, and screenshots of the IP log. She examined them carefully, her brows drawing together slightly. Emily, this is serious. They used your company's EIN without your consent. This can be considered fraud, and if any disputes or accidents occur, you would be the one held legally responsible. Hearing that, my heart pounded hard, but at the same time, a weight lifted. Finally, someone was confirming that I wasn't exaggerating. Maya looked up at me, her eyes firm. First, you need to preserve every piece of evidence. Don't delete any emails, don't alter any files. Print everything out, save it to a USB. I'll draft a cease and desist notice for you, a formal order demanding they stop this violation. We'll send it directly to your mother and the gala committee, so they understand you do not authorize the use of your company's name in any contract whatsoever. I nodded, feeling both anxious and resolute. Maya continued, also, I advise you to check every device that has ever been used to log into your company accounts. Have you ever lent out a laptop or iPad? That question jolted me. I remembered the old iPad I had given my parents years ago when their desktop broke. I had never taken it back. On that iPad were stored scanned copies of my company documents and a sample of my electronic signature. Suddenly, everything made sense. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. No one noticed when I slipped into the garage, where they always kept piles of old things. There it was, the iPad lying in a drawer, covered with a thin layer of dust. I slipped it into my bag without saying a word to anyone, then quietly left. My chest ached, because something I had once given in good faith had become the very tool used to turn me into an unwilling signatory. When I powered the iPad on, everything became clear. My company email account was still logged in. In the browser history, I saw the record of multiple logins to the electronic contract service, the last one just a week ago. My name had been signed without my knowledge, without my consent. I stared at the screen, my heart in turmoil. Part of me felt shattered. Betrayal wasn't just in their cold attitudes anymore. It had taken tangible, deliberate form. But another part of me felt as if I had just found a lifeline. This was evidence. This was proof that I wasn't imagining things, that my suspicions had always been justified. I sat in front of that iPad for a long time. Silent tears slid down my face, not the weak tears of someone begging for recognition, but tears that burned and cleansed at the same time. Because for the first time, I held undeniable truth in my hands. I was no longer the daughter pushed to the side table, silenced into a corner. I was the owner of a company, an adult, and now I had the evidence to finally defend myself. When I closed the iPad, a strange feeling rose inside me, both empty and relieved. Empty because the truth was so brutal, but relieved because at last I no longer had to wonder, am I imagining this? I knew I was about to enter an uneven battle with my own family, but at least this time I held a weapon in my hands, and I promised myself I would never let them exploit me again. After that night sitting with the old iPad, staring at the forged electronic signature of my own name, I knew I could no longer live in the endless loop of waiting for my family's approval. I had evidence now. I had Maya Patel by my side as legal support. And more importantly, I had a job, a career I had built with my own grease-stained hands. That was what I needed to hold on to. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with an intensity I had never known. I was practically inside my mobile garage from early morning until late evening. My phone rang constantly, old clients recommending me to friends, new customers coming in from word of mouth. I poured every ounce of energy into it and secured a contract to maintain the entire fleet of a major delivery company in Denver. It was the biggest contract I had ever signed, worth twice the revenue of the previous quarter. And as I put my pen to paper, I couldn't help but think. This signature is real, it's mine, it's proof of the value I've built. No one can forge that. No one. The surge in workload forced me to make a big decision: hiring extra help. I found 2 young technicians, one male and one female, both trained at community college and struggling to find their footing. When I handed them the van keys and new uniforms, I saw a reflection of myself 10 years ago in their eager eyes. I told them, "Here, no one measures your worth by a degree. We work with our hands, with dedication, and the clients will see that." For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't just building a career for myself. I was opening doors for others. In the midst of that busy season, I received an unexpected call. On the other end was a bright young woman's voice. "Hello, Emily, this is Jenna Wu from Denver Local News. We're doing a feature series on women in technical fields, and I was told you're a remarkable example. Would you be willing to do an interview?" For a few seconds, I froze. Part of me felt shy, but then a wave of excitement stirred inside. Maybe it was time I told my story, not one that needed my family's recognition, but one that belonged entirely to me. The next day, Jenna arrived at my mobile garage with a photographer. She asked me about my journey, about why I chose car care instead of the college path. I told her the truth, that I loved the honesty of this work, loved the feeling of seeing results right after putting in the effort, that I had been looked down on for having hands that always smelled of grease. But those very hands had supported me for 10 years. I also told her about my desire to create a space where young people without degrees but with real skills could be given a chance and treated with respect. Jenna listened closely, nodding now and then, her eyes shining as if my story had touched on something bigger than just a newspaper article. A week later, the piece was published on the front page of the feature section. The headline read, "Emily Carter, the woman who turned a mobile garage into her own small empire." In it, Jenna wrote about how I overcame prejudice, built a business from nothing, and became a role model for women choosing paths outside of traditional molds. The photo of me standing beside my service van, hair tied back, smiling with quiet confidence, spread quickly across social media. New clients called nonstop, and other companies reached out to discuss partnerships. Amid the whirlwind of work, one evening I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the printed article taped to my wall. Suddenly I laughed, then tears welled up. For the first time, I felt I was no longer a shadow in my own family. I was no longer the daughter without a degree, sitting silently at the side table. I was Emily Carter, an adult woman, a business owner, a part of a wider community out there. My worth was no longer tied to my parents' judgmental eyes or to my sister's celebrated name. My worth came from each client who trusted me, each employee who placed their hopes in me, each line Jenna wrote with respect. That night, I stepped out onto my balcony, looking down at Denver glowing under a sea of lights. The hum of traffic rose from the distance, a cool breeze swept through my hair. I closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath. For the first time, I felt peace. No longer craving praise from my parents, no longer waiting for a fair glance across a dinner table. I had found where I belonged in my work, in the people who valued me for who I was. And I knew this journey was only just beginning. The gala took place on a Saturday evening glittering with lights at the Grand Convention Center downtown. It was a venue known for hosting prestigious events, with red carpets rolled out from the entrance all the way into the main hall, where politicians, business leaders, and donors gathered. When I arrived, luxury cars lined the street, and guests stepped out in gowns and tuxedos. I wasn't dressed to dazzle. I chose a simple black dress, my hair tied neatly back, just enough to blend into the crowd without drawing attention. I hadn't come to make a scene. I had come to witness, and to affirm that I was no longer trapped in the role of outsider they once forced me into. Before the gala, Maya had helped me prepare meticulously. She drafted a concise legal report, complete with all the evidence. The forged limousine contract, the IP log from my parents' house, and photos of the old iPad containing the misused documents. That report was sent directly to the gala organizers along with a cease and desist order, demanding that my company's name be removed from all promotional materials and contracts. Maya told me, "The piece has been placed on the board, now they'll have to act. All you need to do is stay quiet and watch." I nodded. For the first time in years, I felt no need to argue or beg to be heard. I had the truth, and the truth would speak for itself. That night, the ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, with round tables draped in white cloths and topped with red roses. Volunteers moved gracefully through the room carrying trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres. I sat quietly at a table in the back, sipping a glass of lemonade, watching the stage. Spotlights lit the podium where local officials took turns praising the importance of education and the power of community. Each phrase was met with thunderous applause, echoing in me like distant, unfamiliar drums. I knew this event wasn't meant for me, but for once, I didn't feel hurt. I was here as a witness, not as someone begging for a seat. When the program moved on to honor the distinguished sponsors, my mother appeared on stage. She wore a striking red dress, the lights making her seem determined to claim the entire room. She smiled confidently, her voice ringing strong through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to share a few words about the importance of educational opportunity. Our family has always believed that knowledge is the key to the future, and we are proud to have contributed so that the next generation can step into the world with the best preparation." Every sentence was embellished with proud gestures, as if this event were her personal stage to display her place in society. I sat still, my face calm though my chest churned. Only I knew that in the legal file now sitting with the event organizers, every contribution my mother was proudly boasting about had been signed under my company's name without my consent. With every word she spoke, the gap between the truth and the glittering shell she wore grew sharper. Suddenly, I noticed one of the organizers, a man in a deep blue suit with an event director badge, lean over to whisper something to a colleague before leaving the table. They walked toward the backstage area, speaking quickly, and then one of them stepped onto the stage, lightly touching my mother's elbow just as she finished her speech. I caught the flicker of surprise on her face, though she kept her smile, bowed to the audience, and followed them behind the curtains. The hall erupted with applause, but underneath it I could hear a low ripple of murmurs. I sat perfectly still, watching it unfold as if in slow motion. In that moment, I realized I didn't have to stand up, didn't have to shout to claim my justice. The truth had already made its way to where it needed to be. Maya's report had done the heavy lifting. All I had to do was be present, to witness that this time, no one could push me into a corner or forge my name without consequence. About 15 minutes later, my mother returned to her table, her face stiff, the forced smile frozen halfway. My father sat beside her, whispering repeatedly, but she only shook her head, her eyes avoiding everyone's gaze. I sat a few tables away, quietly observing. No one knew I was there, no one knew I was the one who had pulled back the curtain and let the light in. But I knew, and that was enough. As the program went on, I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of lemonade. In the past, if I had witnessed a scene like this, my heart would have shattered with pain and bitterness. But tonight, I felt something else release. I didn't need to fight for the microphone, didn't need to prove that I deserved a place. I had already stood firm through my work, through the people who believed in me, through the article that had introduced me to an entire community. And when the truth surfaced, all I had to do was sit quietly, observe, and smile. When the gala ended, I walked out with the crowd. There was no applause for me, no spotlight shining in my direction. But I didn't need any of it. As the heavy doors of the convention center closed behind me, I knew I had crossed an important threshold. I had faced my family, faced their exploitation of me, and for the first time, I no longer felt like the one who doesn't belong. I had reclaimed my place, and this time, no one could take it away. The gala ended in glittering lights and polite applause, but only a few days later, the glossy mask began to crack. News traveled faster than anyone expected. The board of the Alumni Association, where my mother held a position in the finance committee, called an emergency meeting. Maya had told me once that when a reputable organization is suspected of fraud or misuse of identity, they don't really care about the details of truth or falsehood. What matters is the image. And she was right. Within 3 days, My mother received an official notice. She was to step down temporarily from the finance committee pending an internal investigation. When I read the forwarded email from Maya, I didn't feel triumphant, nor did I feel regret. What I felt was a cold sense of order. My mother had once stood on stage in a blazing red dress, preaching about educational opportunity, as if our family were a symbol of virtue. Yet, behind the curtain, she had stolen her daughter's company name without permission, using me as a legal shield to satisfy her hunger for prestige. Now, that very act had come back to bite her. Meanwhile, whispers began spreading through the parent community and social groups around Denver. An old classmate sent me a screenshot from a group chat. Heard Mrs. Carter used her daughter's company without permission. How disgraceful. Another added, if a family can't even respect each other, how can they expect outsiders to trust them? I sat in my apartment, reading each line, my hands trembling. For years, I had imagined the day my family's true face would be exposed, but when it finally happened, all I felt was a quiet sadness. After all, they were still my parents. Sophia heard the rumors all the way in Boston. One evening she texted me, "Sis, I need to see you. I'm coming back to Denver this week." I hesitated, but eventually agreed. On Saturday, we met at a small cafe downtown. Sophia looked nothing like the proud image she had worn at her graduation dinner. Her coat was wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes, her voice unsteady as she ordered a latte. She sat across from me, silent for a long while before finally speaking. I didn't realize things had gotten this serious. At the gala, I just thought Mom seemed tense, but afterward, I heard people saying she used your company. Is it true? I looked straight into her eyes, not flinching. Yes, and I have proof. I'm not making this up to drag anyone down. I'm protecting my work. If I stayed silent, all the legal consequences would have fallen on me. Do you understand? Sophia bit her lip, her face tightening as though she were fighting with herself. Then suddenly, tears spilled down her cheeks. Sis, I'm sorry. All these years I stayed quiet. I saw how unfairly they treated you, but I was afraid of losing Mom and Dad's approval. I was a coward. I was stunned. This was the first time Sophia admitted what I had carried all through my youth, the blatant favoritism. For years, she had been cherished as the pride of the family, while I was treated as a shadow, the daughter who never went to college. She had never stood up for me, never stopped the words our mother used to cut me down. But now, as her tears fell onto the wooden table, I realized she truly saw it. I sighed, gently placing my hand on the table. Sophia, I don't need you to apologize on behalf of Mom and Dad. I just need you to understand that I deserve to be seen too. I have my work, my life, my own worth. I'm not looking for their approval anymore. I only ask for respect. Sophia nodded, tears still streaming down her cheeks. I know, and I regret leaving you alone for so long. I don't know how to make it up to you. I shook my head. You don't have to make it up. Just be honest. Don't let yourself get swallowed up in their lies. Choose your own path, but never step on others to get ahead. We sat a while longer in silence. When Sophia finally stood and wrapped her arms tightly around me, I felt something in my chest grow lighter. Not because everything was forgiven, but because at last, the truth had surfaced. For the first time, my sister saw me as an equal, not as a shadow. A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was sharp as a blade. What have you done, Emily? You've shamed this entire family in front of everyone. I closed my eyes and answered calmly. No, Mom. I only protected my work and my name. If you don't want the truth exposed, then don't do the wrong thing in the first place. On the other end of the line, she stayed silent for a long time before hanging up. I sat there, my heartbeat steady, no longer trembling. For the first time, I felt I was no longer the passive one enduring everything. I was the one at the wheel, deciding my own path. I knew that after my mother's reproachful call, nothing would ever go back to the way it was. Not because I didn't care for them anymore, but because I had finally seen clearly how the toxic cycle worked all these years. Every time I tried to claim a place, they pushed me down, and whenever they needed a signature, a legal name, or a bank card, suddenly I became useful. I told myself it was time to end it for good. One morning, I opened my email and saw a message from my father. "Emily, the neighborhood council is fundraising, and we thought you could support by providing vehicle service to make a good impression. Just send the invoice, and we'll take care of it afterward." I read it and let out a bitter laugh. In the past, I would have torn myself up inside, wondering if I should refuse, if I was being too selfish by not helping. But this time, I hit reply and typed a short response. "No. I'm not participating in any project. Don't use my name for anything." Then I pressed send. My chest felt lighter. Just one word, no, but it cut the cord that had bound me for so many years. That evening, I began cleaning out my apartment. I opened drawers, old boxes. There were family photos from Christmas gatherings where I sat in the corner with a forced smile. There were birthday cards from my parents scribbled with quick lines. "Congratulations, hope you find the right path soon." I placed them all into a cardboard box and sealed it shut. I didn't burn them, didn't throw them away. I simply stored them in the back of the closet, as if tucking away a part of my life, not erasing it, but no longer allowing it to overshadow the present. When the apartment was finally tidy and the walls felt bare, I realized I had created more space to breathe, more space to begin again. A few days later, Sophia texted me. She wanted to meet, not to justify our parents this time, but to ask for forgiveness. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me softened, remembering the little sister who once held my hand as we ran around the yard, who used to crawl under my blanket during thunderstorms. But another part reminded me, I couldn't let that softness turn me back into the family's backup wallet ever again. In the end, I agreed to meet her at a small cafe, but I went with a completely different mindset. Sophia arrived, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Sis, I know I stayed silent for too long. I want you to forgive me." I looked at her, drew a deep breath, and spoke slowly. "Sophia, you will always be my sister. That doesn't change, but from today forward, I'm no longer the family's wallet. You can come to me if you truly need sisterhood, but don't expect me to sign papers, put my name on contracts, or take responsibility for things that aren't mine. I've been exploited too many times already." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. I didn't know how much she would truly change, but at the very least, I had set a boundary. And for the first time in our relationship, I felt I was the one at the wheel. While my family turned their backs, I found joy again in my work and my community. An idea began to grow from Jenna Wu's article. Why not start a free career workshop for young women interested in technical trades, girls like I once was, without a college degree but full of passion and skillful hands? I spoke to Maya about it, and she encouraged me. "Emily, that's not just a way to help others, it's a way to claim your own value." So I began. I reached out to a vocational high school and signed up to host a weekend workshop called Women and Auto Technology. For the first time, I stood in front of a group of 15 young girls, their eyes curious, a little doubtful, but filled with anticipation. Holding a wrench in my hand, I smiled and said, "When I was your age, people told me I didn't belong in this world. But today, I'm here to tell you that you absolutely can. We don't need anyone to grant us value. We create it ourselves." Nah. At the end of the session, two girls, one with tight curls, the other with glasses, came up to me and said they wanted to intern at my company. In their eyes, I saw the same spark of belief I once carried when I first entered this trade. I agreed immediately, and as I handed them their work schedules, I realized I had officially stepped into a new role. Not just someone who survived a toxic family, but someone who could pass on opportunity. That night, when I came home, I sat out on the balcony as the Denver night breeze cooled my skin. Looking out over the glittering city, I felt peace settle deep inside me. I knew my parents would continue to criticize me, to brand me as the rebellious daughter. But I was no longer trapped in that cycle. I had cut the ties, drawn the boundary, and chosen to build a new kind of family for myself, the employees, the young women, the people who trusted me not for a degree or a title, but for the true value I brought into their lives. I closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt like I no longer had to prove anything to anyone. I had walked away from that cold, forgotten side table, and now I could build my own one, where everyone who had ever been pushed aside would finally have a rightful seat. On a summer afternoon, Denver glowed golden under the sunset stretching across low rooftops and rows of green trees. My small apartment, once filled only with the hum of engines and the smell of motor oil, now rang with the sound of young laughter. I sat with my 2 new employees and the 2 female interns I had just taken on, gathered around a simple meal on the balcony. The table was an old wooden one I had bought at a thrift market, sanded down, and painted with my own hands. The chairs were pieced together from scraps of wood I had cut and nailed after long workdays. I had built 1 extra chair at the end of the table not because we lacked space, but as a reminder to myself, I had created my own table. There was no expensive wine or elaborate dishes like at a gala, just roasted chicken, boiled corn, and a few simple salads. Yet the air was warmer than at any family dinner I had ever attended. We talked about cars that were hard to fix, new contracts we had signed, and even the dreams of the 2 interns, one who wanted to open her own garage someday, the other who hoped to become a mechanical engineer. Looking at them, I saw myself at 18, only this time, they had someone who believed in them and would stand by their side. In the middle of dinner, the doorbell rang. I was caught off guard. When I opened the door, I saw Sophia standing there, holding an envelope in her hands, her eyes hesitant. No makeup, no glamorous dress, just a plain white t-shirt and worn-out jeans. When she saw me, she offered a faint, awkward smile. "Sis, can I sit with you?" I stood silent for a few seconds before giving a small nod. She handed me the envelope and said, "I wrote down some things I never had the courage to say." I didn't open the letter right away. Instead, I placed it on the table and pulled out the extra chair I had just built. "Sit, this seat is for you." She sat down quietly, serving herself a bit of salad, her eyes red but calm. There was no need for our parents to witness it, no need for anyone to label us as reconciled sisters. That moment alone was enough to ease something inside me. For the first time, I felt a bond that wasn't built on comparison or obligation, but on choice. Sophia chose to come here, to sit in the chair I had made, and that alone gave me peace. Dinner passed with laughter filling the air. When the sun had fully set and the night breeze carried the faint scent of wildflowers across the balcony, I sat in silence, gazing at the simple wooden table in front of me. In my memory, I saw again that night at the fancy restaurant when my mother told me I didn't belong at the main table because I had no degree. The image of the missing chair, the look of disdain, the chorus of laughter from the other side, all of it had once scarred me deeply. But then, I smiled softly. Because I had come to understand, not having a seat was never the end. I began a quiet monologue in my heart, a message meant for anyone who had ever lived through a story like mine. That day, they told me I didn't belong at the table. But in truth, not having a chair was never the end. It was simply a reminder that I had to build my own table and add chairs for those who had once been forgotten. I found my real family, not the ones bound by blood, but the ones who chose to stay because they see my worth. I lifted my gaze and looked around the table. My employees, the 2 young interns laughing brightly, and Sophia sitting quietly with warmth in her eyes. I knew I had traveled a long way from the day I was pushed aside to the corner table. And now, I had not only found my voice, I had also created a place for others. That, I realized, was the greatest victory of my life.